Yesterday, Sayadaw started to explain that one should give up the worldly pleasure that is insignificant in order to get great pleasure that surpasses the worldly pleasure. When the great pleasure is guaranteed, one must be willing to give up the kind of pleasure that is insignificant. The kind of pleasure that can be measured, that has limit, is insignificant. Sayadaw gives an example when family members prepare special food in order to eat with the family, like a family feast, to be eaten with the family, relatives and friends. When they have meals together with family and friends, it is pleasurable. But such kind of pleasure, such kind of happiness has no guarantee. Even though one may be hungry, even though the food may be tasty, delicious, but after the person has taken the food, when the person is full, then she no longer wants to take more food. When the person is full, however the food may be offered, however the food may be available to him, to her, the person will not take any more. There are other kinds of happiness that excels many times than the worldly happiness. Such kind of happiness has guarantee. In order to gain greater kind of happiness that has guarantee, one has to give up the worldly pleasure that has no guarantee. When one is sure to get the greater kind of happiness, then one can easily give up the kind of happiness that is insignificant. In Pali, it is called parijjhaka. Parijjhaka means giving up. When one gives up the worldly pleasure, it is not a loss, as one can gain greater kind of happiness. Buddha perfected paramis, perfections, throughout the round of existence, and Buddha attained great existences. Due to the wholesome deeds that Buddha to be had done, such wholesome deeds give immediate results as well as further results. So as a result, Buddha gained great resultant. Pachima palada paladana, meaning that as a result of wholesome deeds and perfections Buddha had done in the past, in Buddha's last existence, all these wholesome deeds are giving results. So it is like every wholesome deed that Buddha had done in the past, they are going to, they give result. They give result. So Buddha gained these great results of the wholesome deeds and perfections that Buddha had done in the past. Buddha to be was enjoying the worldly pleasure till the age of 29. Till the age of 29, Buddha had all the pleasure that are taken as great by worldlings. At the age of 29, Buddha gained this power of prudence. Buddha gained prudence, understanding that such kind of worldly pleasure has no guarantee, and that there is another kind of pleasure, another kind of happiness that excels so many times than the worldly happiness. Because Buddha had perfected paramis, Buddha had existences where Buddha gained great resultants. At the life of Siddhartha Prince, all the wholesome deeds and perfections that Buddha had perfected gave results as immediate result as well as further result. And Buddha attained all these worldly pleasure. Buddha to be attained all these worldly pleasure that were great. But Buddha to be saw the flaws, the faults of worldly pleasure, and Buddha to be seeked the kind of pleasure that excels so many times than the worldly pleasure that has guarantee. So Buddha to be willingly give up the worldly pleasure in order to gain the Dhamma pleasure, the greater kind of pleasure that excels many times than the worldly pleasure. Buddha gave up the sensual pleasure, and Buddha practiced on his own, and Buddha to be became free from the Kilesas defilements. So Buddha also attained the happiness of seclusion. And Buddha to be was practicing moral conduct. And during that time, Buddha to be was first practicing yoga. And when Buddha to be got on this correct path, Buddha to be practiced Sila, Samadhi and Panya, morality, concentration and wisdom. By practicing Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Buddha to be removed defilements and gained Upasama Sukha, happiness of tranquility or calmness. And Buddha to be attained knowledge stage by stage, and finally knowledge became mature and finally realized Nibbana. By realizing Nibbana, Buddha attained Sambodha Sukha, the pleasure, the happiness of enlightenment. Buddha himself gave up. Buddha to be gave up the worldly pleasure in order to gain the greater pleasure that excels many times than the worldly pleasure, the pleasure that has guarantee. So, yogis who are here also have given up the worldly pleasure in order to join the retreat. Buddha, after giving up the worldly pleasure and by practicing Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Buddha attained enlightenment. Buddha attained the pleasure that has guarantee, that excels many times than the worldly pleasure. And as a result of practicing Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Buddha attained Vijja, the knowledge that understands the good and bad results of good and bad deeds. Buddha understood the welfare of beings by attaining Vidya, by attaining knowledge. And Buddha also attained Mahakaruna, great compassion. With great compassion, Buddha wanted to remove the suffering of beings. With Metta, loving kindness, Buddha guided the beings in order to bring benefits of beings. And with Mahakaruna, great compassion, Buddha prohibited harmful things that can give harm to the beings. Buddha was endowed with Vidya, knowledge, and also Charana, moral conduct. Among Charana, moral conduct, there is Mahakaruna, great compassion. With great compassion, Buddha guided the beings so that beings could avoid from harmful conduct. And with Metta, Buddha guided beings in order to bring benefits of beings. Buddha was endowed with Vidya Charana. Buddha was endowed with both knowledge and compassion. Even this virtue, Vidya Charana Sampanna, the virtue of being endowed with Vidya and Charana, is great, that Buddha was worthy of faith and confidence. So as a human being coming across this Buddha Sasana, one should practice the trainings of the Buddha. One should have Metta, loving kindness towards others. Having loving kindness towards others, there will be patience, forgiveness, sacrifice, compassion towards others. And when one is endowed with such qualities, one becomes a true human, one has a humane mind, and one can also become outstanding human by practicing Sila, Samadhi, Panya. So one should give up Kama Sukha, sensual pleasure, in order to gain greater pleasure that has guarantee, that excels many times than the worldly happiness. By gaining such kind of pleasure that excels many times than the worldly happiness, it will be worthy of becoming a human being in this Buddha's teaching. And in order to reach that kind of stage, one has to practice Satipatthana meditation. Satipatthana meditation can guarantee that the person can gain the stage where one attains the pleasure that excels many times than the worldly pleasure. In the world, there are many kinds of illnesses. There are terminal illnesses and there are ordinary kind of illnesses. When people do not know how to prevent and how to cure illnesses, they are afraid of them. They are afraid when they do not know how to cure these illnesses. So they do not have anyone to depend on, hopeless, they are helpless and destitute. In the past, there are many illnesses such as plague, TB, tuberculosis, and malaria. And nowadays, there is a new disease, AIDS, which cannot be cured. So one has to learn medicine in order to know the root cause of these illnesses, so that one knows how to prevent these illnesses. Medicine, the medicinal doctors, they need to learn medicine in order to understand the root cause of these illnesses, so that the ways to prevent and cure the illness will be known. When knowing the root cause of illness, then the method how to prevent, how to cure the illnesses will be understood, and it is very important. So these medicinal doctors, they can prescribe the way in order to prevent illness, in order to cure the illnesses. And some of the illnesses are already extinct, such as smallpox, plague has already been extinct in the world. But AIDS is still a disease that is incurable. So the medicinal doctors have not found a way to cure AIDS yet. One has to follow the method given by physicians and doctors in order to prevent illness. And one has to follow their method in preventing illness. And Sayadaw says, an example where there is a place where the certain kind of illness is taking place, one has to avoid from going to such kind of place inflicted with illness. During the Buddha's time, there was an illness called Ahivada Roga. There is kind of snake poison in the air. People were afflicted with Ahivada Roga. And if there is a person in the household afflicted with the Ahivada Roga sitting nearby a door, the other family members cannot escape the house by passing the door where the patient is. So in order to escape from the house where a family member is afflicted with the illness, Ahivada, the other family members has to escape by breaking the wall in order to escape from the disease. So certain disease has to be prevented. One has to avoid certain things so that one will not catch the illness. One has to prevent illness, and even if the illness takes place, one has to cure it right away. So doctors always say prevention is better than cure. When one has illness, one has to cure it so that the illness will become less and less, and finally the illness will be uprooted. When the illness is totally uprooted, then one can feel assured that she is totally cured. Just like illnesses, there are 3 stages of Kilesas defilements. Transgressive form of defilements manifest in body and speech. And the second type is obsessive defilements that manifest in the mind. The third one is latent or dormant form of defilements that can arise whenever given the opportunity, whenever there are opportunity, favorable circumstances, then these kilesas will arise. They are called latent or dormant form of defilements. The defilements can be in 3 stages: transgressive defilements, obsessive defilement, and latent or dormant form of defilements. In another way, they can be said gross, medium, and refined form of defilements. The kilesa defilements are tormenting, torturing the person all the time, and such kilesa defilements are causing problem all the time. Vitekama kilesa, transgressive defilements, should be overcome by practicing sila. One has to practice sila, one has to observe precepts. It is called viramani. One should abstain, refraining from physical and verbal misbehavior in order to overcome transgressive defilements. So just like one has to avoid from going to a place inflicted with a disease, in the same way, one has to refrain, one has to abstain from doing certain things in order to overcome the vitekama kilesa, transgressive defilements. So one has to refrain oneself from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, taking intoxicants. So it is a way of overcoming transgressive defilements. One has to prevent these defilements from arising. So just as the person has to prevent illness, in the same way, one has to prevent so that the defilement will not arise. When gross form of defilements arise, the person becomes inferior, degraded. When the person performs transgressions, it also hurts others physically and mentally. Other people will get harmed, both physically and mentally, when one cannot refrain from such misconduct. So one has to avoid oneself from committing misconduct. One has to refrain from doing misconduct. The second type of defilements, it is obsessive defilements that manifest in the mind. In the example of water boiling, there will be bubble coming up. And in the same way, the obsessive defilements can arise in the mind. When obsessive defilements arises in the mind, there will be wanting to kill others, wanting to steal other people's belongings, wanting to commit sexual misconduct, wanting to lie, wanting to take intoxicants, and so on. So these obsessive defilements should be prevented by mindfulness. One has to be mindful of every arising object in order to prevent these defilements from arising. And when these defilements arise, one should cure it right away by being mindful. If one is not being mindful, kilesa defilements will arise. And by being mindful, kilesa defilements cannot arise. When there is lack of mindfulness, the mind will not be concentrated. There will not be concentration. There can be this wrongful desire to kill others, to take other people's belongings by force, and so on. So by lack of mindfulness, these obsessive defilements can arise in the mind, and when one cannot remove them, one can transgress in wrongdoing. In order to prevent such things, one should be mindful of every arising object. In order to note the presently arising object, one should aim one's noting mind towards the object, and one should put effort so that the noting mind will reach the object of meditation. By noting the object with aim and effort, mindfulness will be developed, and one should exert ardent effort in the practice. One should exert ardent effort in order to note the presently arising object. By noting with aim and effort, the noting mind will stick onto the object. Mindfulness will develop. The mind will not run elsewhere, but instead the mind will be concentrated and unified, and there will be samadhi, concentration. One has to develop one's mind. One has to develop this mind consisting of sati, samadhi, and panya. And one has to initiate, one has to develop, increase such kind of mind with sati and samadhi. Bhavana means initiating, developing, increasing, cultivating the mind so that the mind becomes from small to big, from tender to ripe. So it is very important to develop the mind that has the factors viriya, sati and samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration. Atano sandane cikdam puna puna janetiti bhavana, meaning that one has to develop wholesome mind again and again so that wholesome mind consisting of viriya, sati, samadhi will be developed and cultured. It is called bhavana. When there is lack of mindfulness, there can be wrongful wishes such as wanting to kill others, wanting to torment others, wanting to lie, wanting to take intoxicants, and so on. So such kind of defilements can arise in the mind, and such obsessive defilements should be prevented and cured by being mindful. One has to note on presently arising object, and when one has mindfulness, one can prevent these defilements from arising. And when these defilements arise, one should cure them right away by noting. When sati, mindfulness, is present, the mind will be pure and clean. When the person has a pure mind by being mindful, his or her mind is humane. By practicing morality, one will be a true human. When the person is mindful, his or her mind will be pure and clean, and thus his or her mind will be humane. And one has to practice sila, samadhi, panya in order to overcome these defilements. By developing knowledge, one can uproot Kilesas defilements. Practicing sila alone is not enough in order to overcome latent or dormant form of defilements. And samadhi alone is not enough in order to overcome latent and dormant form of defilement. One has to practice panya in order to overcome latent and dormant form of defilement. Practicing sila and samadhi cannot overcome wrong view, one has to develop knowledge. If one does not know distinctly between mind and matter, there will be jiva atta, wrong view about the soul. There will be wrong view of soul so long as one cannot differentiate between mind and matter. If one does not understand cause and effect, there will be ahetuka ditti, causeless view. If one does not understand that the relevant cause giving effect to relevant effect, there will be visama hetuka ditti, fictitious wrong view. And the person has wrong view, thinking that it is Brahma creating the world. The person has wrong view of Creator. And if one believes that everything is connected with the karma, there will be pubbekata hetuka ditti. In this way, if one cannot develop knowledge, there will be wrong view. One will be clinging onto wrong view. Discerning mind and matter, one overcomes jiva atta. One overcomes the wrong view of jiva atta. One has to develop knowledge in order to overcome wrong view. And the more one develops knowledge, the more one will become free from wrong view and clinging. One has to develop Vipassana knowledge stage by stage so that one will come to know the truth and one will automatically dispel wrong view and clinging by developing knowledge. Developing knowledge, one is overcoming, abandoning the defilements momentarily, so that the defilements will become weaker and weaker, and finally these defilements will be abandoned totally when one realizes Nibbana, when one realizes the Magga Jnana. When one becomes a Sotapanna, the person overcomes wrong view, ditti, and also one overcomes Vicikicca, skeptical doubt. As a Sotapanna, one overcomes ditti and Vicikicca, wrong view, and skeptical doubt, and one will no longer have extreme form of lobha, dosa, moha, mana. Extreme form of mana, conceit, will also be overcome. There will not be envy or jealousy. By becoming a Sotapanna, one removes and abandons the defilement that can lead the person to lower existences. Just as malaria has to be suppressed and uprooted, in the same way, these defilements should be prevented, cured, suppressed, and uprooted. Buddha had prescribed ways in order to prevent, cure, suppress, and uproot these defilements. So these gross form of defilements should be avoided by practicing sila. Medium form of defilements should be prevented and cured by practicing samadhi. Latent and dormant form of defilements should be uprooted by attaining Ariya Magga Jnana, supramundane knowledge. 1 hour is up, and tomorrow Sayadaw will explain how Buddha is compared to a skillful physician, how the Dhamma can be compared to the medicine that can cure illnesses, and Sangha can be compared to a person who has already been treated totally, who is already been cured. And Sayadaw will continue to explain tomorrow. Imaya Dhamma nu Dhamma Patipatiya Buddham Pujemi Dhammam Pujemi Sangham Pujemi Atta Imaya Patipadaya Jara Maranama Parimochisami Idano Punyam Asavakaya Vaham Hotu Idano Punyam Nibbanasa Pajayo Hotu Imam no Punya Bhagan Sabasatana Vipachima Sabbe Satta Imam Punya Bhagan Lapitawa Sukhita Bhavantu Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu